Good afternoon on this beautiful Friday. We've had a lot of beautiful weather lately, and we're just grateful to the Lord. Sunday, that we're going to be seeing about 80, 90 people here in our two services, and so we've been working hard to prepare for that. If for some reason you didn't register, it would be really helpful if you would email either Gary or myself or Luke. Just we can work with you in this last minute to make sure that you're able to be here. If you're not able to be here, I just want to encourage you that it will feel different from the live stream. It'll feel like there's a congregation again, and we want you to get used to that. Today, what we wanted to do on Table Talk is we wanted to just take a little bit of time and talk about just some resources to encourage you in your spiritual walk. Some of you are people who you like to read, and we want to continue to foster that. Christians are readers, and readers. The saying goes, "Readers are leaders," and so we want to be shaping another generation. We want to be having influence in the people around us, and one of the best ways to do that is to read. Now, some people are not readers, and that doesn't mean that your influence is lost or that you can't have that influence, but that you need to have the tools then to be effective as a Christian. And so we'll talk about also some resources that you can either listen to or watch. So today, to start off, Luke, you've got a book that you want to recommend to us. It's a classic. What's the book that you want to recommend?
Yeah, so the book I'm bringing to the table here this afternoon is a book I'm sure many of you have heard of before. It's called The Pilgrim's Progress by John Bunyan. An excellent book, a classic book, famously the second best-selling book of all time, behind only the Bible. So a very well-known and very well-loved piece of fiction.
So, Luke, why? I know there's lots of reasons to pick a classic, but why would you choose that one in particular?
Yeah, the Pilgrim's Progress is a great example of how much an author can teach you through a work of fiction. It is a wonderful blend of an enjoyable story that you can get into the characters, and that you can appreciate on a story level, on a fictional level, but also it's a story that teaches. It's a story that is very clearly designed to teach the reader many elements of the nature of Christian life. And it does so almost in such a subtle way that you might even not realize you're learning, which is sometimes the best way to learn.
And for those of you who are wondering, John Bunyan was a pastor in England. He was what's called a nonconformist, and the nonconformists were those pastors who refused to be licensed to preach. They believed in the freedom of religion. They believed that the gospel should be freely proclaimed. They shouldn't be under the restrictions of the state. And so because of Bunyan's stance for the freedom of religion, freedom of expression, he ended up going to prison, and during his time in prison, that's where he wrote Pilgrim's Progress. So he redeemed the time. So what have you done during COVID? We could joke about that, but in all seriousness, we thank the Lord that Christians have kept their perspective in times of trial, and truly a great piece of literature. You can find that. You can find updated versions of the Pilgrim's Progress on Amazon if you're looking for modern English, or if you want to venture into 17th century English, which is not that difficult if you put your mind to it. You can find many of those resources free online. Gary, I know you've been reading a book on Table Talk, and what's the book that have you found so compelling?
Well, one is an even older classic, actually, than Pilgrim's Progress, and that's the good old Bible. So I encourage you that any reading that you do comes after this. But once you get through your devotions, I have been going through a book that came out, I believe, in 2018 called The Gospel Comes with a House Key. I wanted to mention it today just in case some of you only tune in on Fridays and you're not catching Tuesday, and my recommendations that have come every week the last 3 weeks. It's by Rosaria Butterfield. a convert to Christianity. She was a professor of English at Syracuse University. She's got a great conversion story, which is a book in itself. So I think she's been a Christian about 20 years. And this one, as I said, came out in 2018.
So, Gary, what have you found compelling about The Gospel Comes with a House Key?
I think it's a great fit for us, actually, as a congregation. It is, I don't know what section, frankly, of a Christian bookstore it would be placed in. It's written in a very compelling way. She often is telling a story of her own life and experiences or observations she makes. But it could easily fit in the evangelism category of the bookstore as well, because really it is the outworking of evangelism through hospitality. And I think it's something that resonates with the leadership team here, our pastoral team, our elders. We've talked about it with our elders as well, that we see it as a way of modeling to our congregation how to do evangelism effectively. It's emphasizes the role of relationship, and not relationship in the sense of here's a friend that then becomes some kind of Christian target where I'm going to subversively bring in the gospel or confront their sin. It's really about just being a natural Christian and living out the gospel in a transparent way before your friends, your relatives, the people you live and work with. And I think it's something that, I've said this on Tuesday, other than some evangelism books which leave us feeling distanced, like that might be good if you're Corey McKenna or if you're some biblical scholar like John Stott, but what about me? Well, you read this book and you say, I can do that too. I can see myself being that kind of evangelist, working through hospitality.
Yeah, a great book. I would highly recommend that one as well. I had to cut out a picture of my book because I left my book at home. But let's see if you can see that. Maybe not. It's called Gentle and Lowly, Christ, the Heart of Christ for Sinners and Sufferers. I've written a review of it. It will be published, I think, next week on the Gospel Coalition Canada website. So you'll be able to read that there. I'll post a link on Facebook to that. I have to say that there are a number of books that in my life they have had a dramatic impact upon me, and for various reasons. Some because they have opened up a deep understanding of the Bible. Others because they've given me a profound insight into culture. But Gentle and Lowly, it's written by a man who, his name's Dane Ortland. He's written this because he understands that at the heart of every Christian is still a deep-seated suspicion of what is God like. Yes, he loves me, but that love feels like he's tolerating me. And the reason I would recommend it is that I don't know of a book, apart from the scriptures that I have read, that has caused me to see the Lord's grace and mercy and kindness and love for me, coupled with both a profoundness in theology and at the same time a writing style that makes my heart soar in worship. I honestly can say that there were times where I struggled to read more than a chapter because the pages just continued to impact me so deeply, page after page. And in fact, the final pages I read through tears of joy. And it's very seldom that I find a book just moves me that much. So Christ's Heart for Sinners and Sufferers, Dane Ortland has written this book, Gentle and Lowly, and I'd really encourage you to check that one out. By the way, we'll put links up on our Facebook page under this video just to these resources so that you can check them out. Now, for those of you who are not, you're not readers, you might be wondering, well, what do I do? Like, I struggle to read. It's not my favorite.
Hopefully you're still listening
at
this point.
Because by this point, you might be going, oh, these guys, they're always talking about books. Luke, what would be a resource you'd recommend to the person who they've maybe got a commute, or they want to take advantage of time when they're out in the fields in the tractor, or they've got some extra time when they're walking and they'd like to listen to something?
Yeah, absolutely. Some of you may have noticed, especially over the past few months, that there's a lot going on in the world right now. We're seeing a whole lot of news, a whole lot of confusing and complicated issues are bombarding us basically everywhere we go right now. And one of the most helpful resources that I've come across to help understand what's going on in the world and understand what's going on in the news from a biblical perspective and from a Christian perspective is a podcast called The Briefing, which is done by a man named Dr. Albert Mohler, who is the president of the Southern Baptist Theological Seminary, the school where I got my degree and where Andrew got his. He's a wonderful man who is very, very good at thinking biblically about cultural events and everything going on in the world. His podcasts are short enough to be digestible. They're usually 20 or 30 minutes, so you don't have to set aside 2 hours to listen to an episode. He's very faithful to produce his podcast. I think since he started, you can count the number of days he's missed on one hand. He's very, very disciplined as a human being, and every day, without fail, he uploads the podcast early in the morning. I think they get started really early for each morning's episode, and a great way, if you have questions or if you're having difficulty thinking through the complex issues you see in the news, Dr. Mohler has an excellent way of breaking it down, making it easy to understand, and sticking extremely closely to the gospel and to the truths of Scripture. I couldn't recommend it more highly. It's The Briefing by Albert Mohler.
I think you can find that on albertmohler.com, so we'll put up the link to that. It'd be really helpful to listen to some of his discussions, especially around the racial tensions in the United States. Albert Mohler has been able to really understand what is systemic racism without adopting many of the theories of Karl Marx, which is behind communist thinking and deep socialist thinking. And he really tries to distinguish Christian thought and how to think biblically in light of many of these complex issues without falling into what many in the mainstream media would abide by and think about. So a great resource. Gary, what podcast or video series would you recommend for folks to check out?
Well, it's a great day to be a reader. So many books out there. It's also a great day to be a non-reader. I hesitate to say that, but I do admit, there are just so many resources now for you to take in a book, whether it's an audio book or, as we've been talking about, podcasts. One good source that I would recommend would be 9marks.org. That's 9 as the number, marks.org. And they have a plethora of information and resources on there, from articles, reading, or podcasts, and a variety of topics as well. So not unlike, I guess, The Briefing, in that it does try to say, how does our faith integrate with what's going on around us? And obviously in 2020, that would be one, the pandemic, and two, the highly racialized situations that we've got, especially in the States. And on both of those fronts, they've been given some really critical and good resources for us to consider. I know all of us, I think, have engaged a bit with 9 Marks ministry, and I have found it very helpful. I will say this, though. There are a lot of materials out there, and lots of them will come under the banner of the Christian faith. Please pray before you just submit yourself to something. If you get something going off on the inside of you where you're wondering, is this solid and sound in its theology and its practice that it's recommending, don't hesitate to talk to one of us. We'd love to help you. These are ones that we certainly feel safe with. There are other great resources out there, and we don't want to limit it to just what we're talking about, but I also want to say with pastoral caution, don't just believe everything you hear or read.
Absolutely. I know with 9 Marks, it's been a ministry. So Mark Dever is the pastor of Capitol Hill Baptist Church in Washington, D.C. He is actually good friends with Albert Mohler. And so, surprise, surprise, a ministry that we would commend. Not only that, but a ministry that I know for me personally, it's shaped how we think about pastoral ministry, how we think about churchmanship, and think about theology. Though we don't take everything that they say, we recognize that they are seeking to be very biblically faithful, and so a very great resource. I want to recommend, I'm going to cheat here, guys. I'm going to do 2. I want to recommend for the video watchers out there, a great way to learn the Bible is to go to the Bible Project, and you can find it on YouTube. If you just type in the Bible Project, what you'll find are these very artistic drawings that kind of move as the video goes along, and they do several things. Some videos follow a theme of Scripture, and they'll trace an idea. This is called biblical theology, and how a theme in the Scriptures develops. And it's done in an artistic way, in a way that will keep you engaged, and usually a video lasts from 3 to 12 minutes, depending on how deep the subject is. The other resource that they have is they often use these introductions to various books of the Bible. And as you watch it, they'll have it'll be like a drawing of a scroll that's unfolding. And they'll explain the various parts of a book. And it will give you a great overview from Genesis to Revelation. You can get each one of those books, and it will give you a quick understanding of a book of Scripture. Can't recommend that enough. And to tag onto that, I would say, if you're looking for something more devotional, Dane Ortland has also done some videos on Gentle and Lowly. They're about 3 to 4 minutes long, just a simple devotional thought based off of his book. And he takes a scripture, he reads it, and then he shares a thought from his book. And so if you're not a reader, you sound intrigued by the book, you can also just check out that. But as always, if you're not a reader and you're thinking, well, I don't have time to watch videos, I can listen to something, maybe the books that we've mentioned sound intriguing, could I recommend as well that you look at audiobooks? They're a great way as well to use your time when you're commuting. So those are some great resources, and we just want to encourage you by having these opportunities, not that you would feel forced or compelled to, but that these are encouragements from us to you, that they'll nourish your soul. So this has been just a great, I always love this time of year. Typically we do this in our e-bulletins, and we'll do this again in the e-bulletins in the summer. We'll talk about some resources, and I hope that they encourage you. If you find something that you've ever got a question about, a book or a podcast or vodcast, please contact us. We'd be glad to share with you our thoughts or answer any questions that you have. And always we want to be discerning, as Gary was mentioning, because as we grow in wisdom, as we grow in the Scriptures, we'll be able to smell the difference and taste the difference and see the difference between what is true and good and beautiful and what is sometimes just a little bit off. And so we want to encourage you in your growth in the Lord. Until next week, we'll sign off from Table Talk, and we are looking forward to Sunday, and we anticipate worshiping the Lord. We'll be smaller in numbers, but that does not mean we'll be small in faith or in joy. We'll be mighty in our rejoicing in the Lord. Amen. So, until Sunday, or until we see you again on Table Talk, God bless you. Have a great week.
Bye, everyone.
Bye-bye.